Hi, Kathy and Naomi. It's so wonderful to see you and to have the chance to chat with you today. I always love connecting with you, and I'm really excited to hear more about your journey as feminists, activists, and donors. But let me just start by asking you to introduce yourselves so that our listeners have an idea of who they're going to be hearing from today.
I'm Kathy Levinson, and I'm in Silicon Valley. And I think that one way I would describe myself is as a tempered radical. And I think that is pushing the edge of the envelope wherever you are in ways that force people to think differently than they have before, but not be so offensive that you don't get invited back to the table. And I think pushing the edge of the envelope is just how I've lived my life.
I'm Naomi Fine, and I live by the values of contribution, connection, and learning. And within those values, doing the right thing for our lesbian, bisexual, and queer community fits right in. I first spent more than 3 decades in the corporate world with a legal career. And when I had the opportunity to retire, I saw it as an opening for me to apply my skills and my passion to do the right thing for our community by founding LesbianGlobal. And it's been a wonderful experience. We together have been strategic philanthropists for several decades now. So it's a great way for us to apply our skills and learning to our legacy project.
It's great to have you on our podcast. We'd love to hear you share a little bit about how you first got involved in activism around causes supporting lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, transgender people, especially LBQ folks, and how you first got involved in the world of philanthropy.
I got my start many decades ago when I was still working in the corporate world. And at the time, and for many listeners, they might not be familiar with this, but the company that I worked for, in fact, no corporations offered health insurance to gay couples. And so, although it was risky at the time, I decided to push to get domestic partners health insurance for our company and all the employees. And that was the first time I think I really realized that as an individual, I could make a difference in people's lives beyond just my life, and specifically in the lives of LGBTQ people.
And for me, I think my philanthropy started very young. My parents were very philanthropic. I grew up in a fairly conservative Jewish household, and tzedakah, which is giving, and the concept of being very generous in our giving was really very much a part of our everyday life. I remember before I was 10 years old going on a hunger march, and I believe that we marched for 10 miles together. I think I got carried for some of it, but the whole idea that we who have a responsibility to give to those who don't have was ingrained in me at a very early stage of my life.
That's really wonderful to hear a little bit more about that. And I'm curious, what is it about supporting the queer community and lesbian and queer women in particular that feels so important and meaningful to you?
Well, living as an out lesbian for so many decades and seeing the discrimination against women and then against gay people, it seems so important to speak up and be heard and be visible. And I know when I've been in women's spaces, lesbians aren't really specifically talked about. And when I'm in gay spaces, lesbians aren't talked about. It's much more about gay men. And so bringing visibility to this, me as an individual and my population as lesbians, just was so important to be seen and to have our voices heard.
What about you, Naomi? How is being involved in supporting lesbian, bisexual, and queer women become important to you in your life?
I think I've always recognized that as someone who can give to those who aren't able to really speak for themselves, it's always been a very important value in my life. And as somebody who came out as a lesbian, and by the way, I'm very cognizant that there are a lot of women who love women who don't identify as lesbian. They may identify as bisexual or queer, or just somebody who loves another person of the same sex. But for me, I came out in law school, and that was several decades ago. And I realized that there was such a stigma to being a lesbian. And so here I was studying law to try to help others and speak out for those who had been discriminated against. And what I learned is that there were some who were so afraid to speak out because they would lose their job, they would lose their ability to have a safe place in their homes or with their families, that I saw from the very beginning of my coming out that there was a way in which, as a woman, and so someone who is very much affected by patriarchy, and as somebody who identifies as a lesbian, so somebody who is very much discriminated against, especially at the time that I came out, there's that intersection between living where there's so much homophobia and there's so much patriarchy that I knew there was a place where I could make a difference by speaking up and speaking out as a lesbian who hopefully could speak up for those who couldn't speak up for themselves.
That's amazing. And I know that you both have been trailblazers and certainly role models for me and others for a long time. And you've been involved in a lot of different causes over the years. I'm just curious, how did you start getting interested in the idea of supporting and getting involved with global issues and global causes? And why did that become important to you?
In the early stages of our philanthropy, we were very much domestically centered and focused on the United States. And what we realized is that so many other people were focused on the United States too. And many of our colleagues, friends, and fellow philanthropists weren't looking internationally. And we learned that so little money goes from the United States outside the United States. And then once you go internationally, even less money goes to LGBT groups. And further, even less money goes to LBQ women. And we realize that a little money can go a long way, a much longer way than it can when it's given in the United States. It's also more difficult to give internationally, which is why I think many people don't. And so once we understood that giving internationally was important, then being able to partner with people who have those connections internationally made a huge difference for us. And then what we wanted to do is bring other people into that circle to say, you too can give internationally, and a little money can make a huge difference in the lives of LBQ women around the world.
Yeah, I wanted to first of all confess that I think we're both type A personalities. So for us, making the biggest impact and being really strategic about how we do that has been important from the beginning. And so, as Kathy said, where we can make the biggest impact and really lift all boats, because to the extent that we can uplift our LBQ sisters, our lesbian, bisexual, and queer sisters globally, it is going to help everywhere, including back home here in the US. So I think there's a way in which people who, and this is where I feel so optimistic and positive about our work, people who think, oh, they only have $10 to contribute or maybe 10 hours a month to contribute, they can make such a big difference in people's lives to the extent that they focus some of their attention globally. And I also want to just do a big shout out to Outright, because I will say we have been inspired so much by the work of Outright. At the time we founded Lesbian Global, Jessica Stern was the executive director. And before she left, she put together the LBQ Connect program. It really showed us that there is a path to helping LBQ women specifically that doesn't in any way take away from the very important work that's being done for our LGBTQI spectrum brothers and sisters. That really helps to recognize that by supporting and providing mentoring and giving resources to our community, we are really strengthening our more diverse and wider community.
Well, you've got a great segue into my next question, which is just about how, if you remember when you first got involved with Outright, and why do you feel like Outright's work and LBQ Connect in particular is special or valuable?
What was so important to us is to be able to give specifically and intentionally to LBQ led and benefiting organizations. And it was so disappointing to learn that there aren't that many of them. And Outright is one of the few organizations that has a program that's specifically for LBQ activists. And as Naomi said, to teach and mentor and help create community as well as get resources to them. And so for us and for members of Lesbian Global, as we look to strengthen LBQ women around the world, LBQ Connect just fits right into our sweet spot.
Well, I can't tell you how much we appreciate your partnership and support. And I would love for our listeners to hear a little bit more about what you're doing with Lesbian Global. What is it? Who are you? And what kinds of things are you hoping to achieve with this mechanism and community for giving?
I think one of the most important things for us is to make our giving being data driven. So rather than just giving to the latest, greatest opportunity, we really wanted it to be founded in research, thorough research that had been done. And so the first thing that we did is to partner with Human Rights Watch to understand the global human rights needs of LBQ women around the world. So that's the foundation of all that we do. The second thing that we wanted to accomplish is actually to create a community of LBQ women who are interested in learning more about the global needs of LBQ women around the world. So rather than just Naomi and I giving in the privacy of our own home, what we wanted to do is create a community of other like-minded women who wanted to learn from and with each other about the opportunities. And the third thing we wanted to do is to be able to share the information about the research with so many other organizations that now donate internationally, but not to LBQ women. And we wanted to make this report available to as many people as we can. So we're both growing the LBQ community of philanthropists, and we're also reaching broadly to share the report and the research so that other organizations will do what Outright's already done and have an LBQ specific focus. Human Rights Watch has already done that. Outright has already done that. And we're hoping that more and more organizations follow suit.
That's so important. And it makes me think, with all of the work that you've done through Lesbian Global and other causes that you've been involved in, if there are any lessons that you could share about your journey or from your journey as donors who are really focused on feminist and LBQ issues and causes. And so any lessons and also any stories of impact or progress you've been a part of supporting that you're particularly excited about.
I think for me, one of the big lessons in founding Lesbian Global is one person can make a very big difference. And there are a lot of people right now who are just so busy or feel so stretched with their time and with their resources. And there is something so inspiring about learning with other LBQ women about what needs to be done and what can be done. And by doing this work, and for some, there's no room for more work. So doing this passion project with what little we have actually can be very inspiring and very motivating and very uplifting. And I know there's a lot of science that suggests that when we give, we benefit even more than the person we give to. I think Lesbian Global is a very good example of how that happens.
I love that. Well, I think it would be great to end on a hopeful note, and I would love to hear what gives you hope today as activists and donors and engaged citizens in the world. What is something that gives you hope?
There are so many things that give me hope, but I'll say one thing that probably seems very small, but when we get a new member at Lesbian Global and they've never seen themselves as a philanthropist, they've never donated before, they don't really even know how to approach it, and they feel part of our community and they are inspired to contribute and give more, whether it's their time or their talent or their treasure.
For me, it's also very inspiring to meet with our grantees. And what we do is we're privileged white women in the United States giving money and time and thought leadership to this. But we know of many women around the world who are risking their lives to stand up and help their community of lesbian, bi, and queer women to just live better lives. And they are the real heroes. They are the real courageous ones. They are the ones who, for me, are just so uplifting and inspiring. So if they're doing so much good work for the world, I want to support them and find that very hopeful and very inspiring.
I think one thing I would like to add to what I've said earlier is just that I think there's something about out of sight, out of mind, and it's easy to give to the charity next door or who the last person is who asked you for money, or to give to the local SPCA because you love dogs. And I think that it's harder to be passionate about your philanthropy when it's not touching you right in your backyard. And so it's exciting to us. It's definitely exciting to me when I hear about what LBQ women are doing around the world, and trying to bring that closer to home and closer to our local members in the United States, I think is an important part of what we do.
I think that was great. If I could ask just one last question, I would be curious to know what your vision or your hopes would be for our movement, let's say 15 or 20 years from now, or a generation from now. What do you want to see happening for LBQ people and causes?
I sure hope that our LBQ sisters around the world aren't fighting for visibility and aren't fighting for survival, but instead are leading safe, effective, and meaningful lives wherever it is that they live in the world, and that they know that they have support from a broader community around the world. In a way, it would be lovely if Lesbian Global didn't need to exist, but given the patriarchies that exist around the world and the homophobia that exists around the world, I don't think that's really going to be true. I think we'll be around. So I think what's most important is that the people, as Naomi said earlier, the LBQ women who are doing this work and are really in the trenches and risking their lives, know that they have our support to continue to do that work and to be able to do it in a safe and thriving community.
I think women are particularly resourceful and resilient because we've had to be. I think lesbian, queer, and bisexual women have to be strong and tough So you add all of those qualities together, and we make for great leaders, great communicators. And once we have the freedom to be expressive, to bring our full selves to the table, I hope in 15 or 25 years, the world looks so much better, more peaceful, less environmental degradation, better home lives, because we are recognized for the role models that we can be.
That was a great way to end. Thank you both so much for taking the time to chat with us and share more about yourselves and your reflections about activism and giving, and for all you do to support Outright and our global community and so many wonderful causes, and bring all of us together in community. We are so grateful, and I truly enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Thank you, Katie.
We with you, and thank you for what you do and for what Outright does.